So what is the truth? So truth is you go to meta-analysis. Look at randomized clinical trials and look at the meta-analysis. That gives you the truth. So that is the best level of evidence as of today. Few years down the line, that may go down. Then you have one randomized control trial. One very well done randomized control trial will definitely give you an answer which is trustable and verifiable. That is level 1B. Then you have one controlled but not randomized trial. Okay, it has its own value. Then you have one good experimental trial. Then you have comparison, correlation, case control trials. Then you have expert knowledge. See, my expert knowledge comes so low down. But it has its value. It's easily accessible. The most recent thing you can get it about any subject. If you know the person, you can get it immediately. You don't have to read through the books and etc. etc. But it has its own limitations. All types of evidence are important in understanding and managing patient problems, but not all evidences are equally important. Some evidences are more important than others. First among equals, might have read the book. So some evidences is more important than others in judging what you want to do. Okay? So that I have shown you which is the most important evidence, that is randomized clinical trial with meta-analysis of many randomized clinical trials is the best available evidence for you to depend on. So these levels of, why there are various levels, I told you, because each study has some inherent bias involved in the study, which you cannot get rid of. No matter what you do, you cannot get rid of a bias. So all these give a certain amount of freedom from biases. Okay? So therefore, the more free a study is from bias, the stronger the study is. Okay? So this freedom from bias will creep into any medical research. It's not that it is not there in UK, US, no, it is there also. But how you go about stopping this bias creeping into a research study is what we all talk about in the research methodology. So randomized clinical trial is the strongest evidence of the efficacy of a therapeutic modality. Okay? Now what is at the root of evidence base is the patient should get the best possible treatment. That is the interest at your heart is patient should get the best treatment. So therefore you want to have evidence-based medical practice. Okay? The first step is gathering the evidence of the evidence-based medicine. You have to gather and you need to know how to take this. So how do you gather this evidence of evidence-based medicine? You may consult a colleague, which I already told you. Nothing, absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, it is advisable to consult an expert colleague who will give you the best available information with least worries and least headaches. Okay? But that is only expert opinion. Level 4 evidence, which is at the bottom of the pyramid of evidence-based medicine. One, sir, I started without you. Sorry, patients are already there. Okay. Second, literature search is the best way of searching for evidence, because in the literature you can find all levels of evidence in the literature search. Yesterday you talked about so many websites where you can search your literature, how to search the literature, what to search in the literature, etc. So that is the best. But is that the best way? There are some limitations. Access to internet may not be available, you may not be conversant with how to search the literature, and you may not have libraries always available, and it's time consuming. You may have lack of initiative, interest. Moreover that, the deluge of information which is there, you type in air capsulotomy and alteration of refractive error, you will get 500 articles. What do? You get fed up. You say, all I want to do is to know whether the refractive error changes following air capsulotomy or not. And I have 500 articles. Which one to choose, which one not to choose? Then you look at, do you recognize any name of the person? Take this because I know that fellow, he talked some time ago. So that also induces bias. Okay, you have a page, I don't like his face, so delete that. You understand? So I'll show you some examples with an example. How do we go about using evidence-based medicine in your day-to-day practice? You must all practice evidence-based medicine. If you did not practice evidence-based medicine, you would all have have been using only castor oil as treatment from conjunctiva to the foot. Because castor oil was described as a treatment for many items in a long time ago. So you have a diabetic patient whom you are following up on a regular basis, and he says in the vision has got reduced for the past few months, and his vision has dropped by 3 lines compared to what you had seen him before, and you notice that there is some amount of cataract, and you notice that the macula is slightly, probably abnormal. So what do you do next? As a general practitioner, what would you do? Then you just take a guess. You may want to do cataract, you may want to look at the, what would you do next step? This is a practical problem. What is the next step you would like to do?
Control diabetes. Control diabetes.
Sorry?
Control diabetes.
Diabetes is well controlled. Huh? FFA and OCT. Okay. Straight away you will say FFA and OCT. Now why are you saying FFA and OCT? Because you thought the macula was slightly abnormal, and you want to look at the macula to make sure that his drop in vision is not only due to cataract, but it is due to cataract and probably due to macula. You want to rule out which is the greater contributing factor to his loss of vision, not one. Okay, so therefore, there you are practicing evidence-based medicine. So what is your next step? You will see what are your options. You will say, don't worry, remove cataract, insert IOL, preferably multifocal, get the money, put the money in the pocket and be happy, send the patient home, let him do what he wants. That is the straightforward or maybe crooked way of doing things. That is not an evidence-based medicine practice at all. So, find out what is wrong with the macula. So you have to find out, you have to see what is the contributing factor for loss of vision. Is it cataract, is it macula, or is it both? So that is evidence-based medical practice. So what do? You ask a number of questions. Is this macula normal or is it edematous? This is the first question you ask in your mind. When you are looking at the patient, you ask, is the drop in vision due to diabetic edema, or has the cataract progressed enough to account for this loss of vision? You have to ask this question in your mind. Now, if the drop in vision is due to edema, can I get the OCT done and prove it that it is due to macular edema? Okay, how did the OCT tell you that yes, if you have this amount of macular thickness, it is macular edema, if you have less than this, it's not? How did the OCT decide that?
By comparing with normal.
Because we have, no, normal, don't use the word normal, by comparing normative data. We have data in each, unfortunately all the OCT machines do not have Indian normative data. Apparently you did some, LVPI did something for the normative data for OCTs.
Yes, after you we are creating a normative data.
Yeah, so at the moment we don't have Indian normative data for OCT, but anyway we can still use the outside normative data because the normal of different population group is different. You must remember that normal is not normal. Normal can be anything. So normative data is the right term to use. So what do? You will get the OCT done. Then your question arises, okay, should the grid laser be done for diabetic edema immediately after cataract surgery, or should I do it before cataract surgery? Is the next question on your mind. Now, if I do the grid laser, does it work in all patients with diabetic macular edema? No, we don't know. Okay, these are all the questions which should immediately go in your mind. I am not a retinal specialist, I am a strabismologist, but still, if I look at the patient, these are the things which should go in my mind. Does the patient need cataract operation besides laser therapy? Or, in other words, is the cataract contributing also to his loss of vision? Does the diabetic retinopathy progress at all after cataract surgery, even if the cataract surgery is an uncomplicated one? See how many questions you have in your mind. Just you have seen a cataract with the macular edema, his vision is down. These are the questions at least which go through my mind. Next, is the grid laser followed by cataract extraction better option? You do the cataract, a few days, few weeks later, do the grid. Is it the better option, or is there any other option? You would have gone to some meetings. You would have heard people saying, "Oh, I gave Avastin and I do the cataract at the same time. It works much better." So is it a better option? These are the questions which you have to ask. So when you ask these questions and practice, that is evidence-based medicine practice. You have to have a clear understanding and you have to have a clear answer for these questions in your mind, and then you proceed. So what do? Is the macula abnormal or is macula normal? You do the OCT. The OCT says the macular area is about 350, 360 thickness. So what do you consider it as? Macular edema. You will say, okay, this is a macular edema, most probably due to diabetes, because the patient has been a diabetic for a long time. So this is macular edema. Once you know that this is macular edema.
But why you can't do a 78 or your examination? Why you need to do?
Yeah. Clinical evaluation will itself tell you. I'm not discounting the clinical.
I think that should be the first step.
100% agree. Your clinical evaluation and clinical acumen is very important, but to substantiate your clinical acumen and your clinical judgment, OCT will also give you a better understanding of the situation. So you do OCT. Now, should the grade laser be done for diabetic macular edema immediately after cataract surgery or before? So what do? You phone a friend, a vitreoretinal friend. Should I do before or should I do after? He will say the cataract is very dense, you can't do it before, do it after, no problem. Or he will say, no, try and remove the cataract, give Avastin and then do the laser a little bit down the line, you will say. That is, if you want an expert opinion, just phone a friend, he will say. Then he will say, no, let me, that fellow Santanu Gopal is not good. Let me search the literature. What do? You will search. And promptly you will type in Google. You have all heard Google search and Google Scholar. Type this, diabetic macular edema and cataract. You will get 549,000 articles with these two terms, diabetic macular edema and cataract. 5 lakh, you will say, forget it. There is no way I am going to proceed any further. No, don't get so disheartened, I will say. So what do? You add more qualifications to this. Phacoemulsification, diabetic macular edema, progression. Okay, then it comes down to 10,800 users. Still not manageable number, correct? 10,000, you don't have time to read 10,000 articles. So, Google search or Google Scholar is not a good literature search. But keep that in mind, don't discount Google at all, but keep it in mind, it's not a good search engine. What do? This is my favorite database. There are hundreds and hundreds of databases, including cautionary library databases. This one is my favorite, tripdatabase.com. Gives a wonderful, so you go to tripdatabase.com. Okay? What does it do? It's a clinical search tool designed to allow health professionals to rapidly identify the highest quality clinical evidence. That is why I use this. It gives you only randomized controlled trials and meta-analysis and then others. So you go to that, you will get 59 articles on tripdatabase.com which tells you diabetic macular edema, cataract, phacoemulsification, progression of retina. 59 articles is not easy to scan through. Where is 5,50,000 and where is 50? You understand? So literature search means if you use all the clauses that you want. PubMed is slightly more complicated because you have to put the bracket, you must remember and in capital, OR in capital. If you forget it, you will waste a lot of time. So don't waste a lot of time.
Now it is automated actually. Now it is automated. Now PubMed is automated. It itself create
Correct. But even then PubMed takes you to a lot of useless places. And most of the time in PubMed what happens is abstract not available. Abstract given by the author, 2 lines in horrible English you would have written from China or somewhere. You will have that only that as abstract. So like that there are problems with PubMed. PubMed is not that easy for a beginning person to search. It's an extraordinarily good search engine and a lot of things are free in that. You can request articles through the author, you get free articles also. And Vasumati is not around, she will give you any number of articles provided you request her nicely. Okay? So, Next, you have now understood that 20% of the patients with diabetic macular edema, the diabetic macular edema does deteriorate even after an uncomplicated cataract extraction. You have searched the literature and you have come to the conclusion that, my God, let me take out this non-biased randomized control trial which shows that in nearly 20% of the patients, the diabetic macular edema does deteriorate even after an uncomplicated operation. That's what it says. Now you are confused. Should I operate and end up with less vision, or should I not operate and send it off to somebody else? It is not my clinic. You see how you are, now you say, no, why should I do that? You phone Natarajan, will say, do the grid laser prior to cataract. Yes. Because he has not seen the extent of cataract. You start doing cataract, grid laser, you realize the reaction doesn't come at all because cataract is dense. Or you realize that it is very painful because you have to keep on increasing the energy till you see a reaction and it's very painful. Or you will say do the cataract extraction within a month or so after grid laser. Okay? So you can't do grid laser, then you say, okay, let me do the cataract, and you know that the macular edema will progress if you do the cataract. Then what do? You say, give Avastin at the end of cataract. Finished. So you have cured his macular edema at least temporarily, and you have removed his cataract. But is that the correct way to go? Now you look at the level 1 evidence for all these questions. All the questions you have asked, you must try to look at for level 1 evidence for every question. At the moment for Avastin, we do not have level 1 evidence in diabetes. Am I right? We don't have level 1. But we have a lot of anecdotal evidence. I myself give Avastin at the time of cataract removal, soon after the end of the cataract removal. I do give Avastin where I think that diabetic retinopathy or maculopathy is there. And I believe that the vision does improve. But it needs randomized control. That is my feeling because I am a private practitioner. I make extra money with no added effort. I give Avastin, make more money. Patient is very happy. His vision improves on first post-operative day to 6/9 or better. He is very happy. But is that the correct way to go? So till we get the level 1 evidence, I have no answer. But I will do it. The more you read, the more you get confused. Okay, so best way to go about in evidence-based medicine is you first ask all these questions in your mind. And second, you look for the best available evidence in the literature about these questions you have asked. You can be very precise in asking questions and you get very precise answers also in the form of level 1 or level 1A evidence in the literature. You go to the right website, look for them, get an answer, and once you have the answer, you proceed doing the. So what would you do now? Once you have the level 1A evidence, you will say, remove the cataract, give Avastin at the same time, although that is not level 1A evidence, but the vision does improve. Are you practicing evidence-based medicine? The answer is yes, you are practicing. But you are using level 1A evidence for something and level 4 evidence for something else, which is nothing wrong. But nevertheless, you are using an evidence-based medicine. So that completes your evidence-based medical practice. All of you are, to a large extent, are doing evidence-based medicine. But your evidence you are choosing should be as current as possible, not as old as possible. 1959 evidence. Okay, so even in the present day, what we do is we do not take any research more than 10 years ago into consideration at all, because the concepts have changed. When I started doing my ophthalmology to what I have learned today, there is a vast. I don't practice what I had learned in my postgraduate days. Nothing to do with what I had learned. But that is your general guideline for you to achieve higher levels in your medical practice. So if you practice evidence-based medicine, certainly the level of your practice will be far better than an average of. I think I will stop at that. If you have any questions, you are most welcome. Because I was supposed to add a little bit about statistics because there is lack of time and they all have covered the whole thing, so I said I'll leave it at that. Okay? Thank you very much.
I want Bakal has to give some comments on evidence-based practice. No. Am I having a evidence-based practice explanation was partly covered by Dr. Nitya Gupte, using the statistics and how to interpret it.
See, there are,
Yes, sir.
no, I'm not commenting on you, I'm commenting on general, so don't bother about it.
No, you can comment on me also, no harm. I won't hit you, I'm all right.
Nutty has provoked me, so,
He always does.
yeah. So, basically, it's all good to have a level 1 evidence before we start doing anything. But how often, as a tertiary care provider, you will have a level 1 evidence available to you?
But sir, how you can have evidence without doing anything?
I'm coming to that. That's what, that's what Nutty has done to me.
The chicken and egg situation.
Okay. So, at a primary care level, for a simple things, day-to-day routine, you can have a level 1 evidence. Level 1 evidence comes with a very well-designed, controlled, randomized control studies. Randomized control studies are typically done by industry, where they have interest, or by NIH when they find that this is in the public interest. For most of the things, funds are not available to generate that kind of a documentary evidence. And in absence of that, 80% of at least my practice comes. 80% of my practice is without level 1 evidence. And level 1 evidence is a gradual process. Somebody has to find a problem, suggest a solution. It typically starts when, and there are two types of research. One is a investigator-initiated research. Another is research driven by fundamental problem which affects the society. When it's a fundamental problem which affects the society, research is driven by either industry or by government-funded agencies. But when it's an investigator, which by and large all of us are, if you see a problem, probably there is no solution available at that point in time. So you think of a solution, you do something in the best interest of the patient, you are happy, and the first thing comes as a case report. Somebody looks at that case report, he faces the same problem, he says, okay, let me do one more case like this, and you generate, from one case report, you generate series of case reports, and series goes on. When the level of evidence goes little higher, and the problem becomes more defined, that case series probably gets converted into a small control trial with not a significant number and not a significance attached. Most of the studies will stop at that level. Beyond that, it becomes very difficult without cooperative groups to generate a level 1 evidence. So level 1 evidence is good to have, but most of the times you won't have it. And if you have level 1 evidence for all the things in life, journals will not be required because you won't be publishing anything, you will not be doing anything. Okay, that answers?
No, the issue here, what I am not talking about the journal, what I was talking is, as an average street
No,
level
we agree with
practicing
you.
ophthalmologist.
Dr. Satna, we agree with you. What we are
yes, sir.
trying to do is trying to give an overview that
Correct.
every time you won't have a level 1 evidence. It's good to know that level 1 evidence exists,
Yeah.
but when it does not exist, for a person like me, it is 80% of the time it does not exist. And what do I do?
Take level 4, take level
So-
3, level 2.
Yeah, so, and then sometimes you will have to generate.
Yeah. Till you generate up to level 1, you will have to accept certain levels of evidences. Nothing wrong. I'm
Yeah.
not saying it is wrong.
So we
As
agree
an
with you.
average
No, we
practitioner,
agree
it's
with
not.
you. We agree with you 100%. We are not.
Oh,
arguing.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
So I just wanted to add that it's not always that the level 1 evidence is gold standard and one should blindly follow level 1 evidence. To give an example, we have the branch vein occlusion study which says that laser or treatment for vein occlusion should be done only if the vision is less than 6/12 and it has been less for a period of 3 months.
Yeah.
Now if we keep applying that for today's patient and wait for 3 months, it's not correct at all because we very well know that anti-VEGFs or steroids will definitely improve the vision back to 6/6.
Not for
So
long.
we have not
for
for
long.
Agree,
Then
not
it is
for,
relevant.
no,
See,
it's
I
not
think
for
that's very
long.
important.
Not
I-
for
I-
long, but
Can I interrupt for a minute?
when
I-
the level
can
1
I interrupt
evidence
for a minute?
happened is very important. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
What
DVO study has
temporary, what
happened a
point of
decade
time?
back when antivirus were not available.
Correct.
Correct.
So, you know, like not every disease you need a level 1 evidence and change your practice.
For most diseases, it doesn't exist.
Yes.
For most diseases, level 1
Level one
evidence
evidence
does
may not
not
be
exist.
See, the other side of the story is level 1 will also keep changing and somebody has to work to change it.
Yes.
Like he said, for a level 1, I will go up to what is last 10 years. But what was last? When we were students, resident in ophthalmology, like many of you are, we had a first edition of Stellar's textbook surgery. We said that myopia is a contraindication for intracapsular surgery. And by the time I was a second year, the new edition came where it was said that myopia is an indication for intracapsular surgery. And in both the editions, IOL was a contraindication for a routine senile cataract surgery. Okay? So, for a particular moment, you have a level 1 evidence. But somebody has to work upwards to change that level 1 evidence. And who is that somebody? It is one of us.
Very true.
So I think, okay, can I answer?
I was thinking if you are following the level 3 evidence, you don't have enough data available, then we should be more strict about certain things. I don't know, this is my idea, that you should be reporting all complications. Now there should be a forum where, suppose you have injection Avastin at present, or Fabo when we first started. There should be a forum where each and every complication should be reported. Because then, because if we wait for the first paper to be published with the evidence of what is the percentage of complications, it's quite late. It's 1 or 2 years
True,
because before the first paper is published saying that this is not safe.
The problem here is everyone should report the complication.
Yeah.
I have no complication, so where should I
No,
report?
reporting, every should report, but where? Our question is where to report and how to report.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I answer here?
Yeah.
We are
Yeah.
also,
Many of us as clinicians, we are not aware of it. The ICMR has started a national pharmacovigilance program. And there are 8 or 10 centers in the entire country. For Western India, the center is at KEM Hospital, Mumbai. And practitioners who are practicing it can download the adverse event form from the National Pharmacovigilance site or ICMR site and submit the adverse event.
That's only for drugs.
That's only for the drugs.
Only for drugs.
Not necessary. See, ideally it is for the drugs, but she was talking about Avastin. Avastin is a drug. Where you are giving Avastin, it is definitely an adverse event which may be related or may not be related to a drug. And then we should submit it as an adverse event. Agree, it is only for drugs. Obviously for surgery, for procedures, the system could be different. But at least as for drugs, are we, you know...
But see, today, all of us have a voice. All of us, an individual, you have a voice. If you think very strongly about it, put on YouTube. Put on YouTube your complications that you want to know people. Anybody who is searching for, probably at least use it.
because I think keratoconus after LASIK was reported quite late in time.
Right. Okay. And I think that sometimes